This week's Parsha is Parshas Lecha, and it's an interesting Parsha because it is the foundational story of the Jewish people. This is where the promise is given to Avraham Avinu that he will be turned into a great nation and that he will be blessed, and the people around him will only see success, and those who do not wish to see him be successful, they themselves will be met with a great and many curses. And then we begin his story. But what's really fascinating about the Avraham story is that based on the time period and when it happens, it has no parallels in any other story of its time period, meaning in the Bronze Age when these events all occur. When he picks up and leaves Ur-Kasdim and goes to Haran and then goes to Eretz Canaan and then eventually into Mitzrayim, these migration patterns were still happening. It was a common thing, but was uncommon is to have a complete unknown from the story come out of nowhere and be found by Hashem and brought to Eretz Canaan. So the Midrash identifies with this issue, and the Midrash in Bereshis Rabbah, it's one of the first ones in our Parsha, and it says that Hashem spoke to Avraham. It says when he goes, now he's Avraham at the beginning of the story, not Avraham. It says, but that Hashem speaks to him and he says something, and the Midrash goes off of that. It says, it's like someone who finds a fine oil, and this fine, fragrant oil is in a place that is full of unwanted smells. So therefore, one takes the fragrant oil to a place where one can enjoy the fragrance. And so the Midrash, very few words, sort of sums up the feelings in and around the story. Here not introduces Avraham with any backstory whatsoever. One would expect that there's some calamity, something occurring, something going on. Noach is picked because the world is full of people who are vicious and cruel and thievery, and depending on how you want to touch the Hamas and the Targum translate and so on. And there's a need for a Noach. We don't feel anything happening, having to see or perceive a need for an Avraham. And in a way, that's exactly the perfect backdrop to start the story itself in the Torah. Now, when you go through all the Midrashim, when you go through the works of Halakha, the story of Avraham, after receiving the entire Torah, is central and paramount to the value system of the Jewish people. So when the Rambam begins his discussion of the laws of Avodah Zarah, he says that Avraham, and this is in the first chapter of those laws of Avodah Zarah, of the Chavim Muzalais, and all that whole section over there, he says there that because of how far people had strayed from worshiping Hashem, Avraham came back and he manifested a challenge to the way in which idolaters had perceived the world. He was a philosopher king, and he challenged others, and he brought people to his side, and he was dragged before the court by his father. His father Terach drags him to the court, and the court is led by Nimrod, who is mentioned in the text himself, right? Nimrod is described in Parshas Noach as a very powerful and influential king, and he challenges the king, and he's thrown into a fiery furnace, and a miracle occurs for him. None of this is in the Torah. And all this is brought down in the Rambam, and he collects it from a number of midrashic sources. And then the commentators in the Rambam argue, hey, the Midrash says like this, the Midrash says like that. So many, many years later, there's an oral tradition that arises and gives us more context for Avraham. But the actual story itself just gives us a few important hints that lead us to believe that Avraham was special and God chose him. But we are not going to see that before Avraham comes in. So the Ramban points out that there's a basic hint in the storyline. So at the end of Parshas Noach, it talks about how Terach is leaving Ur-Kasdim and he goes to Haran. But everyone goes with him mostly because of the fact that Avraham goes with him, and then Lot comes, and then Nahor comes, and they all come, but Haran is already dead. And those are the lines there. And the Ramban points out that stylistically the pasuk is saying to us that Avraham was already influential in his own family, more so than his own father. And then it talks about the passing of Terach. And that's important because stylistically in the story, when someone is done being influential on the scene, they are listed as having passed on. Even though Noach himself could have shook hands with Avraham at his store, running the store with Terach, they could have hung out there. Noach comes in and he goes, I'm here to come sell you some wine. Ugh, what's with the idols? I don't like the idols here. Right? But we don't have that story. We don't have little vignettes of stories of Noah coming by and patting Avraham on the head and giving him candies and asking him to teach him whatever pasuk he learned today. We don't get any of that. But what we do get are some glimpses of it. And that's why it's important to understand that the choosing of Avraham is the most important part of the story and not what Avraham does to earn it. It's the choosing, because Hashem is narrating the story to us to tell us that I am taking Avraham. And why is that important? Because that's the message that everybody gets generations later. It's not Avraham the philosopher, Avraham the hero. We don't rally around him because we rally around him because of the conquests that he made as a child, as an adult, as an old man. But he's rallied behind because of an agreement, an unbreakable contract that he makes with Hashem at this time. Hashem says, go to Canaan and I will give you blessings. And so he goes. That's the only terms of the agreement. Get up and go. And as they point out stylistically, Lech, Lecha, go for your benefit. I'm not saying that I'm going to do something to compel you to go. You kind of have to go. We kind of need you to go. The story kind of needs you to go. We kind of know you're going to go. But then this introduces the fact that Avraham actually goes through a number of trials and tribulations. And this stylistically is echoed in the way in which we arrange the story of the Pesach Haggadah, the Passover Seder. And in the Seder itself, the Mishnah says that they were poschin beganai, right? We open the story with the very lowest part. What's the lowest part? Ovdei avodah zara hayu avosina b'Mitzrayim. Right, our forefathers, our forefathers were idol worshippers in a land across the sea, and that's what the Midrash is saying when it says Avraham was this fine, fragrant oil that needed to be removed from a place that wasn't so fragrant, or it was fragrant in an unpleasing way, to a place where it was fragrant. And the Haggadah talks about that when we start beginning to tell the story in Magid, that we begin with this fact, and the quote actually comes from Sefer Yehoshua. Yehoshua gives his final testament to the entire Jewish people after conquering the land. His testament is basically to say, I'm following Hashem, but he opens it by saying, we originally came from idolaters. Hashem took Avraham and he increased his seed. But the thing is that we write the word ve'arbe etzaro. It says there, we write ve'arbe, it's the kri, the way it's read is arbe. Aleph, resh, beis, hey. I will increase. But it's actually written ve'arav. Aleph, resh, beis, with no hey at the end. So ve'arav is like ve'arav lo ve'kamalav. I'm waiting, I'm setting a trap for him. I'm quarreling with him. Right, so and Reeve also comes from that. Arev and Reeve are similar words. Why the no hey at the end to say I'm talking about giving you I'm not giving you a raise. I'm just going to give you more responsibilities, right? So in a sense, it's Hashem was doing an act of kindness to Avraham, and was looking for act of kindness in return. The kindness was, I will take you from this unfragrant place across the river. You can't stay in this country. It's full of something you're not going to like. We don't even talk about it at that point. Even though earlier on in Seder Bereshis, we've already talked about people going off and worshiping other gods. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story, and the reason why it's central to the Torah story, is because it's about the struggle itself, taking Avraham and placing him in these situations so that his faith is proven to be unwavering. The journey begins with you and I agreeing that I'm the creator of the world, and I'm bestowing blessing on you for listening to my laws, and life will be better because of it. And Avraham looks back and he goes, I agree. I think there's a set of laws that are above and beyond human comprehension, that are being given to us by the Creator, that are going to be things that if we do them, life will be better. Sounds like a good plan. I think I'll do that. So in a way, it shows a total meeting of the minds, while you have an infinitely powerful being, Hashem, and a much, much lesser being, Avraham, coming to an agreement. Why would they do that? Why would there need to be that? We already know Hashem can force things into the way in which they're done. And that's a wonderful introduction for understanding why mitzvos and shalom should be performed out of love. And that's really the aspect of Avraham. Avraham is Avraham Ohavi. Avraham is the one who really encompasses a feeling of love, a love of things, a love of creation. And he brought so many people in. And as the Ramban points out, that as soon as he is told to leave Haran, he's not being rewarded for what he does in Haran, but he takes with him Kol HaNefesh Asher Asu B'Haran. Oh, by the way, he doesn't just go, it's not just like him and his wife are going down to Canaan. He's taking this whole contingent with him. Where do these people come from? Don't worry about that. By the time you get to the story of in Chazal, the Midrashim, and what the Rambam brings down, you hear this fabulous story, this hero of truth and a philosopher general who leads an army of brilliant people to bring truth and justice to the world through their words and not through convincing people to believe in the capricious ways of the idols, and that they can manipulate things with magic, and all that nonsense needs to fall by the wayside is what Avraham does. But that's like a really great story. But it's not our job to entertain you. It's our job in the Torah to educate and to make you see why this is important. So immediately we find that you get to Canaan and you got to go down to Egypt. Again, the story doesn't make sense. Here I am, I'm plucking you out, I have to put you in a better place. But you got to go to Egypt right now because there's no food to eat in Canaan. So why am I here? I'm here to go to Egypt? And this is how the story in many ways unfolds. The idea is that sometimes we don't understand exactly how the plan works, but we know that in our interactions with Hashem, that inevitably, even though it doesn't work out the way we think it does go in the direction in which we plan it to go. And that's why we are introduced to the tests. That's why Yehoshua talks about this is part of getting rid of the ganai, the things that were unpleasant about being in the land or across the rivers, was that we had to remove ourselves from a number of these behaviors and things that were there. And the Malbim actually says himself in Seder Yehoshua, in chapter 24, where he gives this testament, in explaining this, he says it's not only the important part that they were idol worshippers, but there was a number of things about themselves, meaning between Avraham and Sarah and all the other people, that those behaviors needed to be cleansed. Certain things about them needed to be removed and purified. And it says, and that's why the story is told that way. It starts off with understanding how deep-seated we were, not only in a religious system, but also in a moral system that was decrepit. And so Avraham is being asked to not only demonstrate a philosophy, but also demonstrate a personality, something that is permanent and lasting. And so the entire story of Lech Lecha at that point is not just so much I'm taking you and I'm blessing you for listening to the command, but I also need to see you demonstrate something that I haven't seen from your forefathers. I didn't see this in Noach. Noach expected the children to be good. He curses Canaan. How helpful is it to be the last 5 people on earth, and you curse, 20% of them to say, you'll all be servants, right? Okay, that was his decision, and that's the story. So, we understand why Canaan was the behaviors were wrong and bad, but at the same time, that's not what Hashem looks for. We're not looking to tell the story of subjugating others for our own aggrandizement. This is a humble person with humble beginnings who's on a personal pursuit for truth. And that's why he is the fragrant oil. And he's not ready yet to be opened and unleashed on the world. First, he has to demonstrate his unwavering commitment to the process. And therefore, we see him go through a number of trials and tribulations. And so we begin all that with Lech Lecha. So we're not going to go through a whole run-through of Lech Lecha, but just an idea to kind of think about how important it is to study this parsha and appreciate this parsha, and why the person of Avraham himself, what he does in committing himself to Hashem, is more important to the narrative of the Torah than it is for us to understand, having received the whole Torah, what our personal battles are against the behaviors and moral failings of Avodah Zarah. Have a good Shabbos.